From the very first day when the teaching situation emerged up till today, there have been formed only three main types of methods: passive, active, and interactive. All these three categories, each one of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. We will look at them more in detail and try to answer the question: is any of these categories more efficient for adult learners? So we will start from passive methods. When an educator uses passive method, he becomes the center of the whole educational process, and the learner is just a passive listener. The interaction in this case is based on so-called one-way communication. The learner is expected to assimilate information from the facts that are presented in the lecture, and is the only person who is actually responsible for being concentrated on the lesson, on the lecture, on the educator, and who is responsible for the whole results of this educational process. This current lecture that you are listening now is a very good example of passive methods, because you cannot ask me any question and I cannot ask you any question and give you any comments. I even don't see you. And the only possibility for me to be sure that you really got clearly all the information that I wanted to deliver, it's a final quiz which you will have to pass after the series of my lectures. So fully online learning, where there is no interaction between educator and learners, is an example of passive approach. And it sounds like it is not very effective. But in reality, it is not like that. In the book, Teaching in a Digital Age, Dr. Tony Bates, he is a Canadian educator and a businessman, gives a very interesting statistics about using of passive methods and fully online courses. So he writes that online learning enrollments have been increasing by between 10 and 20% per annum for the last 15 years or so in North America, compared with an increase in campus-based enrollments of around 2–3% per annum. So you see the huge difference in interest to passive methods and to in-campus-based approach, where the teaching methods most of the time is active or interactive. At the moment, about 7 million people only in the United States of America are enrolled in at least one online course, which is based fully on passive methods of teaching. So are there any advantages of passive teaching methods? Yes. And one of them, a huge one, is that the educator can transfer a big amount of information in a very short period of time. Imagine that to learn only one topic, you need to read about 6, 7, or 8, or sometimes 10 books. How much time does it take from you? But if you listen to a lecture on this topic, all the information from these 7, 8, 10 books is already filtered and structured for you. And you spend about 1 hour or maybe an hour and a half to listen to it. And another advantage is when the educator can prepare a less labor-intensive lesson in advance. Are there any disadvantages of passive methods? Yes. I am sure that you know what is MOOC, Massive Open Online Course. So MOOC represent disadvantages of passive methods. By statistics provided by Tony Bates in his book, 25% of registered learners never take more than the first assignment of the MOOC, and less than 10% of all the registered learners ever complete the final assessment. So it shows that with passive methods, the learner should be really very much motivated for learning. And that's why so many people tend to stop the learning process in the beginning. Okay, now we're moving to active approach, active methods. So what is that? Active approach is a form of interaction which equally involves both educator and learners, and it is based on so-called two-way of communication. So in active learning approach, we start to communicate with you, but only the communication is possible only between educator and students, not between students. Example of online active methods is webinar. You know that during the webinar, educator presents the lecture and at the same time simultaneously reads what learners type, what kind of questions or comments they type in the chat, and he can give answers or give comments or ask students and learners questions. Another example of active method is 1 minute reflection. 1 minute reflection means that after a lecture, educator presents all the learners with one short question. This question should be first answered individually for each learner, and then learners have to provide the oral answers. So they have to say aloud what they think, what is their answer. So I, as educator, when I hear the answer, can give any comments and give additional questions, but other students or other learners in the group just listen to the answers of each other, but cannot start any discussion about it. Another example of the method is post-it parade. So post-it parade means that after the lecture or after presentation, educator provides learners with task like a problem or a question, and learners have to write down their solutions or their answers on the small post-it paper and stick it to the wall somewhere in the room. So all the learners, after they finalized this kind of job, can move in the room and read answers and ideas of each other. Again, they cannot start communication with each other, they just can read. And I, as educator, if I gave this task to them, can read and give comments to the whole room. So there is like interaction between adults, audience, and me as educator. Then we move to interactive learning, interactive teaching methods. So interactive teaching allows the communication not only between educator and learners, but also between learners as well. So interactive teaching assumes that learners are equally involved in the learning process and reflect on what they know and what they are thinking. Interactive teaching is not something mysterious. So if you lead small or large group discussions, it means you already teach interactively. So what are advantages of these types of methods? First of all is that the interactive teaching method help to organize learning process in a way that each individual in the group contributes to the learning process of other people. And interactive teaching methods contribute to development of communication skills of learners, like the ability to listen to others, evaluate different points of view, participate in group discussions, make joint decisions, and develop tolerance. Interactive teaching methods also increase level of cognitive activity and develop critical thinking. What are examples of interactive teaching methods? Group discussions, case studies, any type of games like interactive role-playing games, problem-solving methods, group methods of idea development. Interactive learning also can be organized online in case when after the presentation or after lecture, educator gives assignment and learners should evaluate works of each other. Or if educator uses online forums where learners can interact and discuss some learned concepts or ask each other questions on the topic. After listening, information about these three categories or three types of maths. Now, how do you think? Which category is more suitable or more effective for adult learners? In reality, there is no single answer. And educators have a lot of discussion in scientific articles as well. For example, Michael Druck, Dennis Schoenbecker, and Jeffrey Gordon in the article Active and Passive Teaching Methodologies, Student Outcomes over the Semester course, which was published in 2015, report the results of a small experiment that they conducted when they tried to evaluate what is better, passive teaching methods or active teaching methods. So over the semester of the course on marketing, one section of the course were taught primarily with usage of active methods, and another section was taught primarily with the help of passive methods. What is interesting, at the end of the experiment, they didn't find much differences. So they found that the scores are almost similar among the students, and they didn't find any differences among the attitudes that students formed during this semester. So they came to the conclusion that perhaps there are some other factors that influence students' motivation and attitude to learning and the results of learning. Another interesting point of view is expressed by the Blake Harvard psychology teacher at James Clemens High School in Madison, Alabama, in the United States. In his blog, he wrote, "The term passive learning is an oxymoron. There is no such thing. If students are learning, then they are not passive. And learning does not always include moving or talking." This is exactly the idea that I heard from my teachers of pedagogy when I was a student of a pedagogical university, and when I presented my report on interactive methods of education. He told that there is no such a thing like passive education, because if a student of any age is involved in the educational process, he is not passive already. And he also added that if interactive methods were so good as you describe them, then all the educators of the world used only them, but it is not like that. Maybe it is not like that, but there is something in interactive teaching methods that make them so popular among educators all over the world and among adult educators as well. Why? When I was 14, I read in a biology book that human brain stops development when we grow up till 25 years old. And I was shocked. I remember the thought that emerged in my mind. My God, I need to study hard when I'm young, because when I become an adult, all my attempts to learn something will be useless because my brain will stop its development. This point of view were dominant for many years. But last decade, neurobiologists and neuropsychologists found proof for absolutely different point of view. They proved that our brain have been developing through whole our life from birth till death. And how we develop our brain? With the help of learning. What kind of learning? Interactive learning. In 2019, a Stanford professor, Boaler, who studies the brain science, published a very interesting book called Limitless Mind, and I advise you to read it, where she presents and proves 6 keys to learning. One of the 6 keys is directly connected to adult education and to interactive teaching methods. So this key number 6 sounds approximately like that. Connecting with people and ideas enhances neural pathways and learning. What does it mean? It means that when in the process of learning, we collaborate with each other, our brains are charged with a very complex tasks. Make sense of another person's thinking. This task stimulates our brain to develop new neuron pathways. And when new neuron pathways emerge in our brain, we grow, we develop ourselves, we become wiser, we become more clever, even if we are 90 years old. What are advantages of interactive teaching methods for adult learners? To interact well in life in general, people need to have an open mind. How to develop open mind? To develop open mind, they need to value differences. Learners start to appreciate and think positively about each other. When educator highlights the importance of different ways of thinking by using interactive teaching methods. When we change our perspective to other people's thinking, it changes how we as adults interact with each other outside of the classroom as well. Interaction between learners during learning process leads to more worthwhile conversation, ultimately better relationships, thinking, and work. It allows becoming comfortable with uncertainty, letting go of judgment, knowing yourself better, becoming more resourceful when facing roadblocks. So again, why it's so important for adults? Part of the reason why adult students stop learning, even when they are already enrolled in some courses, because they find it difficult, the process of learning itself, and think that they are alone in their struggle. When I was enrolled in a very complex and difficult course on business analysis, I saw that people in our group, from one lesson to another, became more and more silent. And there were only several people who were trying to discuss something or tell openly their opinion when the educator asked us questions. And only when we started to work in small groups and we were given tasks which we had to complete all together, we started to understand that this person and this person and this person had difficulties. They said something like, you know, I don't understand anything in this theory. I think that I'm absolutely dumb. But when they hear it from 2, 3 or 4 people in their small group, they understand that they are not so stupid. It's not about the stupidity, it's just a small difficulty in learning some material. It is okay. And we can discuss these difficulties and we can move forward. So an important change takes place when people, adult students, work together and discover that everybody finds some or all of the work difficult. So for adult students, it's really a critical part. Interactive methods help them to understand that for everyone, learning is a hard process. And there are obstacles. Obstacles are common, but we can overcome them altogether. Another reason is when students are young, they have much less stereotypes about everything in the world and about some future and some interesting scientific concept than adults. For adults, hearing other points of view and supporting at the same time peaceful and meaningful discussion with sometimes polar points of view is crucial for getting rid of stereotypes of different types and for widening the perspective. It is believed that interactive teaching method can stimulate development of what is called growth mindset, in contrast with a fixed mindset, which we create or develop in ourselves when till the age of 30, 40, 50, or 60 years old. Also, another reason is that life is not easy and adults know it. When people are over 40 or over 50, they already carry a luggage with unrealized opportunities, with lost bottles, with low self-esteem and self-confidence and pessimism. And they're much more skeptical about the future and themselves than young learners. Interaction during learning process brings hope and belief in inner potential. It broadens perspective, it changes self-attitude, and motivates adults to continue learning and continue self-development. Interactive learning changes us as people. When we learn new ideas in interaction with other people, we see the world differently. They have a different way of thinking and different way of interpreting every event in our life. So now, how do you think? Which approach is more effective for adults? Passive, active, or interactive? In reality, all 3 approaches coexist, and educators mix them sometimes or choose one or another according to time that they have, according to educational goal, or even the physical space available for educational event, and for many other reasons. But when you choose an approach or a method, always remember, the more interactivity you have during your educational event, the more new neuron connections the brain of your learners will make, and more changes in learning, in behavior, and in life in general they will